A struggling black dad helps an elderly man fix a flat tire, but the next day, a helicopter lands on his street and everything changes. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Marcus Johnson's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., jolting him from a restless 4-hour slumber. His body ached from the night shift as a security guard at the downtown office building. 12 hours on his feet, watching monitors and making rounds through empty hallways. He rubbed his eyes, willing the exhaustion away. Today wasn't just any day, it was interview day. In the kitchen of their small 2-bedroom apartment, Marcus measured coffee grounds carefully, stretching what little remained in the canister. The cabinet above revealed a dwindling supply of cereal and a half-empty jar of peanut butter. He checked his wallet. $23.47, barely enough for gas until the end of the week. "Daddy?" Marcus turned to see 7-year-old Jamie standing in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, his Spider-Man pajamas a size too small. "Hey, buddy. Ready for some breakfast? Is your sister up?" Jamie shook his head. "Zoe's still sleeping. Are you going to be home tonight?" Marcus's heart tightened. He'd been working double shifts for weeks now. "I'll be home early, promise. Today's my big interview, remember?" Marcus poured milk over Jamie's cereal, mentally rehearsing potential interview questions. 10 years of programming experience, 5 as senior software engineer at Apex, family medical leave, gap in employment. While Jamie ate, Marcus quietly set out clothes for both children. As he sorted through the mail that had accumulated on the counter, an official-looking envelope caught his eye. His stomach dropped as he read the bold red letters. Final eviction notice. 3 months behind on rent. The landlord's patience had run out. Marcus quickly folded the notice and shoved it into his uniform pocket as Jamie looked up. "What's that, Dad?" "Just boring grown-up stuff." Marcus forced a smile. "Go wake your sister, okay? We need to get moving." As the children got ready, Marcus called their neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who sometimes watched the kids when he worked overtime. Her phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Marcus sighed. He couldn't afford to pay her today anyway. "Change of plans, guys," he announced, helping 5-year-old Zoe with her shoes. "You're coming with Dad today. We'll drop you at school after my interview." "But school doesn't start for hours," Jamie pointed out. "We'll get breakfast on the way," Marcus lied, knowing they couldn't afford it. "Maybe pancakes." In the hallway mirror, Marcus straightened his security guard uniform. He'd have to change in the car. His neighbor, Mr. Washington, had loaned him a charcoal gray suit that hung neatly in a garment bag behind the driver's seat of his 2008 Honda Civic, a car with 187,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on for months. Outside, rain pattered against the windows, growing heavier by the minute. Marcus hurried the children to the car, making sure they were securely buckled in the back seat. "Dad, are we going to have to move?" Jamie asked suddenly as they pulled away from the curb. Marcus's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, meeting his son's worried gaze. Jamie was too perceptive for his own good. "Why would you ask that?" "Tommy at school said his family had to move when his dad lost his job," Jamie said quietly. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Nobody's going anywhere," he replied with a confidence he didn't feel. "I've got 10 years of programming experience, even if I haven't used it since..." His voice faltered. "Since Teresa died, since everything fell apart." "Since Mommy went to heaven?" Zoe asked, clutching her faded teddy bear. "Yeah, baby." Marcus swallowed hard. "But this job I'm interviewing for today is perfect. Good pay, benefits, everything we need." As they merged onto the main avenue, the rain intensified. Marcus turned the wipers to high, squinting to see through the downpour. His eyes burned from fatigue. The interview at the tech company would start in 40 minutes, and the borrowed suit hung pristinely behind his seat. Marcus checked the fuel gauge, just under half a tank. The tech company was 20 miles away in the business district. He'd have enough gas to get there and back, but barely enough to last until next week's paycheck from the security job. "Daddy, look!" Zoe pointed through the rain-streaked window. At first, Marcus didn't see it. Then he spotted an elderly white man struggling at the roadside with a flat tire. The man balanced precariously on a cane in one hand, awkwardly holding a lug wrench in the other. Rain soaked through his thin jacket, and his frail body visibly trembled. Marcus glanced at the dashboard clock. 35 minutes until the interview. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, then immediately looked back to make sure the kids hadn't heard. He signaled and pulled over to the shoulder, a few yards ahead of the man's vintage Cadillac. "Stay in the car," he instructed the children as he pulled the hood of his jacket over his head. "I'll be quick." The rain was merciless, soaking through his uniform almost instantly as he approached the elderly man. "Need some help, sir?" Marcus called over the downpour. Relief washed over the old man's face. "Oh, thank God," he said, blue eyes brightening. "My name's Harold. I tried calling my son, but my cell phone died." Marcus quickly assessed the situation. Flat rear driver's side tire, jack not properly positioned, elderly man with limited mobility. This would take at least 15 minutes, maybe more in this rain. "I've got it," Marcus said, taking the wrench. "Just wait in my car where it's dry. My kids are in the back, but the passenger seat is free." "You're too kind." Harold began to protest, but a gust of wind made him shiver violently. "Please, sir. You'll catch pneumonia out here." While Harold sat in the warmth of the Civic with Jamie and Zoe, Marcus worked rapidly in the rain. The lug nuts were on tight, requiring all his strength to loosen. Muddy water splashed onto his only presentable white shirt as he removed the flat tire and mounted the spare. Glancing at his watch, Marcus saw with dismay that 20 minutes had elapsed. The interview was in 15 minutes, and he still needed to change clothes and drive another 12 miles. Harold emerged from the car as Marcus tightened the last lug nut. "Why are you doing this?" the old man asked. "You're going to be late for something important, by the looks of that suit in your car." Marcus straightened up, water dripping from his soaked hair. "My father taught me that what we give to the world always comes back somehow," he answered, tightening the final bolt. "Besides, it's what I'd want someone to do for him, if he were still alive." As Marcus stored the flat tire in Harold's trunk, the old man reached into his wallet and pulled out several crisp bills. "Please take this. You probably need it more than I do." Marcus stared at the money, the eviction notice heavy in his pocket. $300, enough to buy time with the landlord, maybe even cover part of next month's rent. After a moment's hesitation, he gently pushed Harold's hand away. "I can't, sir. That's not why I stopped." Back in his car, drenched and now smeared with grease, Marcus checked the time. Too late. He was already 10 minutes behind schedule. Still, he had to try. He started the engine and carefully merged back into traffic. "Was that man okay, Daddy?" Zoe asked. "He's fine now, sweetheart. His tire's all fixed." "You got all wet," Jamie observed. "Nothing a change of clothes won't fix," Marcus replied. Though he knew the white shirt was ruined beyond salvation. He pulled into a gas station restroom 5 minutes later, changing as quickly as possible into Mr. Washington's borrowed suit. Despite his best efforts, water spots marked the shirt, and a smudge of grease had transferred to the collar. It was the best he could do. Back on the road, Marcus's phone vibrated in the cup holder. An email notification glowed on the screen. He couldn't read it while driving, but at the next red light, he quickly checked. From Seattle Tech Innovations Recruiting. Subject, today's interview cancellation. The message preview was enough. Interview canceled due to your non-appearance. Position filled. Marcus rested his forehead against the steering wheel as the light turned green. A car behind him honked impatiently. "Dad, are we still going to your interview?" Jamie asked. There's been a change of plans, Marcus managed, his voice steady despite the crushing disappointment. We're going straight to school now. As they turned onto Franklin Avenue, a familiar truck appeared in the rearview mirror, Martinez Towing Service. The same company Marcus had called the previous week when the transmission started slipping, before realizing he couldn't afford the repair. The truck's lights flashed as it pulled alongside them. The driver, a heavy-set Hispanic man Marcus recognized, signaled for him to pull over. With a sinking feeling, Marcus complied, easing the Honda to the curb. "What's happening, Dad?" Jamie asked as the tow truck operator approached. "Just wait here, okay?" Marcus stepped out, rain still pelting down. "Hey, Carlos." Marcus greeted the driver, who had a clipboard protected in a plastic sleeve. "I'm sorry, man," Carlos said, genuine regret in his eyes. "Orders from the finance company. 3 payments behind." "Carlos, please." Marcus lowered his voice, glancing back at the children watching wide-eyed from the back seat. "I've got an interview today. I'll make a payment this week, I swear." Carlos shook his head. "Not my call. They've been trying to reach you for weeks." "My phone was disconnected for a while," Marcus admitted. "Look, can you just give me until tomorrow? For the kids." But Carlos was already hooking up the front of the Honda to the tow truck. "You can get their things out. Want me to call you a cab?" Marcus looked at his wallet with its $23. Not enough for a cab, and certainly not enough to retrieve the car from impound. 10 minutes later, Marcus stood on the sidewalk, holding Zoe while Jamie clutched his backpack. They watched in silence as Carlos drove away with their car. The rain continued relentlessly, soaking through Mr. Washington's borrowed suit. Marcus's eyes burned not just from fatigue now, but from fighting back tears he couldn't afford to shed in front of his children. "What do we do now, Dad?" Jamie asked, his small voice nearly drowned out by the downpour. Drenched under the rain, with his confused children at his side and his car being towed away, Marcus closed his eyes briefly and took a deep breath, unaware that his act of kindness had just placed him on the radar of someone powerful. The 15-minute walk home stretched into an eternity. Each raindrop that pelted Marcus's borrowed suit felt like another small failure, another reminder of just how quickly life could unravel. Jamie and Zoe trudged alongside him, their small shoulders hunched against the downpour, asking questions he had no good answers for. "How will we get to school tomorrow?" Jamie asked, his sneakers squelching in puddles. "We'll take the bus," Marcus replied, forcing confidence into his voice. "It'll be an adventure." Zoe clutched her teddy bear tighter, protecting it from the rain under her jacket. "I don't like this adventure, Daddy." When they finally reached their apartment building, Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting in the hallway, concern etched on her weathered face. "Marcus, the children should be in school. What happened?" Marcus ushered the kids inside before answering. "Car got repossessed. We had some transportation issues." She clicked her tongue sympathetically. "You should have called me. I would have picked them up." "My phone died," he lied, not wanting to admit he couldn't afford to pay her. "Thank you, though." Inside the small apartment, Marcus helped the children out of their wet clothes while his mind raced through their rapidly diminishing options. Without a car, he couldn't get to his night security job. Without that job, he couldn't make even minimal payments on their mounting debts. The apartment, despite its modest size, had always been their sanctuary. Photos of Teresa adorned the walls and shelves, Teresa at their wedding, Teresa holding newborn Jamie, Teresa in the hospital still smiling even as cancer ravaged her body. Her presence remained in every corner, a bittersweet reminder of the life they once had. "Okay, troops," Marcus announced with forced cheerfulness. "Hot showers, dry clothes, and then we'll make some lunch." While the children warmed up, Marcus changed out of the ruined suit and hung it carefully to dry. He'd have to find a way to clean it before returning it to Mr. Washington. In the kitchen, he surveyed their meager supplies and settled on grilled cheese sandwiches, simple comfort food that would stretch their remaining bread and cheese. As Zoe sat at the kitchen table, coloring a picture, Marcus noticed what she was drawing. A large house with a garden, stick figures of the three of them standing in front, all with exaggerated smiles. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, leaning over her shoulder. "What's that big house?" "It's our new home," she explained matter-of-factly. "After we win the lottery." Marcus swallowed hard, ruffling her hair. "It's perfect." While the sandwiches sizzled in the pan, Jamie approached cautiously, his expression serious. "Dad, do we have to live with Grandma now?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Teresa's mother lived in a senior apartment complex in Florida. She could barely care for herself, let alone suddenly take in 3 additional people. "No, buddy. We're staying together no matter what." Marcus knelt to meet his son's eyes. "I promise you that." The landline phone rang, one of the few bills Marcus had prioritized keeping current. The caller ID showed their landlord's number. Marcus let it ring through to voicemail, unable to face another demand for payment he couldn't meet. After lunch, while the children watched an old DVD of cartoons, Marcus sat at the small desk in the corner of the living room, his tablet's cracked screen illuminating his tired face. He scrolled through job listings, filtering for anything he might qualify for. Security positions, janitorial work, data entry, nothing that would come close to replacing his former software engineering salary. 5 empty cardboard boxes sat stacked in the corner of the room, reluctant preparation for the inevitable. Marcus had started collecting them from grocery stores last week, unwilling to admit their purpose even to himself. "When are we going to use those boxes, Dad?" Jamie asked, noticing where Marcus was looking. Marcus sighed. He'd promised himself he wouldn't lie to his children. "We might need to move soon, buddy, but we'll be together, that's what matters." "What about my toys? Can I bring them all?" The innocent question tightened Marcus's chest. "We'll have to pick our favorites. Sometimes when people move, they need to leave some things behind." As evening approached, Marcus tried explaining to the children that they needed to choose a few special toys to keep, making it sound like an exciting selection process rather than a necessary purge. Zoe hugged her teddy bear tighter, making her choice immediately clear. The next morning dawned surprisingly bright after days of rain. Marcus had barely slept, his mind racing with calculations and contingency plans. They were eating cereal when the apartment began to vibrate, windows rattling with an unfamiliar sound. "Earthquake!" Jamie shouted, ducking under the table. "No, not an earthquake," Marcus said, moving to the window. "It sounds like..." A sleek black helicopter descended toward the small park at the end of their street, its rotors whipping the newly dried grass into frenzied circles. "Wow!" Zoe pressed her face against the glass. "Is it the president?" Marcus laughed, his first genuine laugh in days. "I don't think the president visits this neighborhood, sweetheart." Curiosity overrode caution as Marcus and the children joined neighbors gathering on the sidewalk to witness this unusual event. The helicopter touched down gracefully, its engine winding down as onlookers murmured speculative theories. "Must be a medical emergency," suggested an elderly woman clutching her bathrobe closed. "Nah, that ain't no medevac," countered a teenage boy. "That's private. Somebody rich." When the helicopter door opened, a tall white man in an impeccable navy suit emerged. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and the confident posture of someone accustomed to authority. He consulted his phone briefly, then scanned the crowd of neighbors before his eyes settled directly on Marcus. With purposeful strides, the man walked straight toward them, ignoring the whispers and stares of the gathered neighbors. "Mr. Johnson?" The man extended his hand. "Robert Whitman, CEO of Whitman Tech. My father told me about you." Marcus frowned, confused. "Your father?" "Harold Whitman, the man you helped yesterday. He's my father." The children looked up at Marcus with wide eyes as neighbors began to disperse, throwing curious glances over their shoulders. Perhaps we could speak inside, Robert suggested, gesturing toward Marcus's building. Still stunned, Marcus led the way back to their apartment, hyper-aware of the empty boxes in the corner, the worn furniture, the faded carpet. Robert Whitman seemed entirely unfazed, his eyes taking in the modest surroundings with polite interest. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance," Robert said once they were seated in the living room. "Helicopter was the fastest way from our Seattle headquarters, and time seemed important, given your situation." "How do you know about my situation?" Marcus asked, instinctively pulling Jamie and Zoe closer to his sides. Robert smiled. "My father called me yesterday, quite moved by your kindness. Said you ruined your shirt and missed an important appointment to help him, then refused payment." He nodded toward the framed diplomas on the wall, inexpensive frames holding Marcus's computer science degree and professional certifications. That got me curious. The children fidgeted restlessly until Marcus suggested they play in their room. Once they were gone, Robert's expression grew more serious. "I did some research on you last night. You were a senior software engineer at Apex for 5 years before—" He paused delicately. "I'm truly sorry for your loss." Marcus tensed his jaw, uncomfortable with this stranger knowing so much about his personal tragedy. "What exactly do you want, Mr. Whitman?" "To offer you a job," Robert replied simply. "Project manager position. Flexible hours to accommodate your children. Full health benefits. Starting salary of $120,000. Marcus stared at him, then laughed bitterly. "Is this some kind of cruel joke?" "I assure you it's not." Robert placed a business card on the coffee table. "My father said you're the kind of man our company needs. Someone whose integrity isn't for sale." He paused, his own expression softening. "Besides, I lost my wife 10 years ago. I know what it's like to try to rebuild." The revelation momentarily silenced Marcus's skepticism. "I haven't worked in tech for 3 years. I've been security guard since you needed flexible hours to care for your wife and later your children," Robert finished. "Your skills are still there, Mr. Johnson. Experience with loss and resilience just adds to your qualifications." He stood, straightening his already immaculate suit. "I'll send a car for you Monday morning, 9 a.m. We can handle the details then." When Robert left, promising to have his pilot avoid landing in the park next time, Marcus closed the door and leaned against it, trembling slightly. "Dad?" Jamie stood in the hallway, holding Robert's elegant business card. "Is this real?" "I think so, buddy," Marcus whispered, still struggling to process what had just happened. "Does this mean we don't have to move?" Before Marcus could answer, sharp knocking thundered against the door behind him. When he opened it, 2 uniformed officers stood in the hallway alongside a man in a suit holding a clipboard. "Marcus Johnson?" the suited man asked. "I'm Edwin Morris, County Marshal. I have a final eviction order here, immediate execution." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "There must be some mistake. I thought I had until the end of the month." "That was last month, sir," Morris replied, not unkindly. "The landlord has been more than patient." While the officers remained respectfully silent, Morris explained that they had until 5 p.m. to vacate the premises. Marcus gathered the children in the living room, trying to explain the situation as gently as possible. "We need to pack our things today," he told them, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "Remember how we talked about moving? It's happening a little sooner than we thought." "But what about the helicopter man's job?" Jamie asked, confusion and fear evident in his eyes. "The job starts Monday," Marcus replied, trying to sound reassuring. "We just need somewhere to stay until then." As they began the heartbreaking process of deciding what to keep and what to leave behind, Marcus's cell phone rang, an unknown number. Hoping it might be Robert Whitman with more details, he answered quickly. The voice on the other end was female, professionally detached. "Mr. Johnson, this is Sandra Watson from Child Protective Services. We've received an anonymous complaint about your living conditions and financial situation. We need to verify if the children are in an appropriate environment. While Robert's men placed the eviction notice on the door, Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. The voice on the other end belonged to a social worker. Mr. Johnson, we've received an anonymous report about your living conditions and financial situation. We need to verify if the children are in an appropriate environment. Marcus sat stiffly in an uncomfortable plastic chair at the community center, trying not to fidget, as Mrs. Bennett, the social worker assigned to his case, flipped through the pages of his file. 3 weeks had passed since the eviction, 3 weeks of uncertainty and makeshift arrangements that had left dark circles under his eyes and a permanent knot in his stomach. Your employment evaluation from Whitman Tech seems promising, Mrs. Bennett said, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. But there's still no formal contract. And this temporary shelter arrangement isn't suitable for permanent custody. Marcus clenched his fists beneath the table. They're finalizing the details. Mr. Whitman promised. Promises don't provide stability, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Bennett interrupted, her voice not unkind but firm. We need concrete guarantees. Children need consistency, especially after trauma. The word trauma stung like an accusation. Marcus had done everything possible to shield Jamie and Zoe from the harsh realities of their situation, maintaining routines and rituals even while sleeping on donated cots in the community center's family dormitory. My children are well adjusted and cared for, Marcus insisted. This is temporary. By next week I'll have a signed contract and be looking at apartments. Mrs. Bennett made a non-committal note in her file. We'll reassess after your employment situation is formalized. Until then, I'll be checking in regularly. The walk back to the dormitory felt longer than usual. Marcus had been shuttling the children to and from their school by bus, maintaining their education despite the upheaval. The community center staff had been kind, allowing them to stay beyond the usual 2-week limit while Marcus waited for his position at Whitman Tech to materialize. When he reached the dormitory, Marcus found Jamie sitting alone on his cot, silent tears streaming down his face. Hey, buddy, what's wrong? Marcus knelt beside his son, heart racing. Where's Zoe? Miss Claire took her to get cookies in the kitchen, Jamie sniffled, referring to one of the volunteers. Dad, are they going to take us away? What? No, of course not. Who said that? Jamie wiped his nose with his sleeve. Some kids said we'll go to foster homes. Different ones. They said brothers and sisters get split up. Marcus pulled his son into a tight embrace, feeling the small body shudder against him. That's not going to happen, he whispered fiercely. I promise you. That night, after the children were asleep, Marcus sat on his cot reviewing the email Robert Whitman had sent, outlining his first week of evaluation at Whitman Tech. Starting tomorrow, he would finally begin working, proving to Mrs. Bennett and anyone else who doubted him that he could provide for his family. Morning came too quickly. Marcus woke the children before dawn, helping them dress in their cleanest clothes. He'd hand-washed their outfits in the center's laundry sink the night before. Today's a big day, he told them over a breakfast of donated cereal. I start my new job, and you get to tell your teachers about our new adventure. What new adventure? Zoe asked, milk dripping from her spoon. Well, after work today, I'll start looking for our new apartment. Maybe this weekend we can go see some places. After dropping the children at school, Marcus headed downtown to the imposing Whitman Tech headquarters. The gleaming glass tower stretched 40 stories into the Seattle skyline, its reflective surface turning the cloudy morning into an abstract painting of grays and whites. Marcus straightened his shoulders and smoothed down his shirt, freshly ironed at the community center's small laundry room. He carried his updated resume and the temporary access code Robert had emailed him in a folder tucked under his arm. The security guard at the front desk directed him to the 38th floor. As the elevator climbed, Marcus rehearsed his introduction to the team. He would be honest about his time away from the industry, but confident in his ability to catch up quickly. When the elevator doors opened, Marcus approached the reception desk with a professional smile. "Good morning. Marcus Johnson, here to see Robert Whitman. I'm starting today as a project manager." The receptionist, a young woman with immaculately styled hair, tapped at her keyboard, frowning slightly. "I'm sorry, we don't have any Marcus Johnson scheduled today." "There must be some mistake," Marcus said, maintaining his smile though his heart began to race. "Robert Whitman hired me personally. I have an access code." He showed her the email on his phone. "Mr. Whitman has been in Asia for 3 weeks, she replied, her frown deepening. "And we don't have any open positions in project management at the moment." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "Could you please check again? Or maybe call Mr. Whitman's assistant?" "Mr. Whitman's executive assistant is with him in Asia," she said, her tone becoming more suspicious. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to... Is there anyone else I could speak with? Human resources, perhaps?" 5 minutes later, Marcus was back in the lobby, escorted by a security guard who remained professionally detached but watchful until Marcus exited through the revolving doors. Outside, the Seattle drizzle had intensified to a steady rainfall. Marcus stood under the building's overhang, trying to make sense of what had happened. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number Robert had given him. An automated message responded, "We're sorry. The number you have dialed is not in service." Panic began to rise in Marcus's chest. Had he imagined the entire encounter? No, the helicopter had been real. Dozens of neighbors had witnessed it. The business card. Where was the card? Marcus realized with horror that he'd left Robert's business card in the apartment when they were evicted. All he had was the email address, which now seemed suspicious, with its generic whitmantikimail.com domain. He hurried to the public library 6 blocks away, ignoring the rain soaking through his clothes. At a computer terminal, Marcus searched for Robert Whitman, CEO, and found dozens of images, none of which showed the man who had visited his apartment. The real Robert Whitman was a 65-year-old man with a white beard, not the 40-something man who had offered Marcus a job. Sick with realization, Marcus searched next for Harold Whitman, Seattle, and found nothing. No social media profiles, no business listings, no obituaries, nothing that would suggest the elderly man with the flat tire existed at all. His phone vibrated with a text message from Mrs. Bennett. "Custody hearing moved to tomorrow 9 a.m. due to new information about your employment situation." Marcus stared at the message in disbelief. How could she know already? He hadn't told anyone about the disastrous morning at Whitman Tech. With trembling fingers, he replied, "There's been a misunderstanding. Please call me." No response came as Marcus spent the next hours desperately searching for any information about Harold or Robert Whitman. He tried calling Whitman Tech's main number, but got nowhere past the front desk. By the time Marcus needed to pick up the children from school, he had pieced together a disturbing realization. He had been elaborately tricked. But why? Who would go to such lengths to offer false hope to a struggling single father? That evening at the community center, Marcus tried to maintain a brave face for Jamie and Zoe, while his mind raced through scenarios and consequences. After dinner, he approached the center's director and explained his situation, asking if they could remain a few more days while he sorted things out. "We'll do what we can," the director promised, though her expression betrayed concern. "But our funding only allows us to house families for limited periods." After putting the children to bed, Marcus sat in the common area with his tablet, searching job listings with increasing desperation. Without references from his current employer, his prospects looked bleak. Just before midnight, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Abandoned mall parking lot, Westlake. Midnight, if you want your children to remain safe." Marcus stared at the message, a cold dread spreading through him. His first instinct was to alert the police, but what would he tell them? That he'd received a cryptic text after being tricked by a fake CEO? They'd dismiss him as paranoid or delusional. He checked on the children, finding them sound asleep. Miss Claire, the night volunteer, sat at a desk near the dormitory entrance reading a paperback novel. "Claire," Marcus whispered, approaching her desk. "I need to step out for a bit. Emergency with a potential employer. The kids are asleep, but could you keep an eye on them?" "Of course," she nodded. "Everything okay?" "Just need to sort something out," he replied, forcing a reassuring smile. The last bus to Westlake was leaving in 10 minutes. Marcus jogged to the stop, his mind cycling through possibilities. Maybe this was legitimate. Perhaps Robert had been delayed returning from Asia and had sent someone else to meet him. Or maybe this was the final step in whatever cruel game was being played with his life. Either way, he needed answers. The abandoned Westlake shopping center loomed dark and silent as Marcus stepped off the bus. Once a thriving mall, it had been closed for renovation 3 years ago, only for the development company to go bankrupt, leaving it in limbo. The vast parking lot was empty except for a single black sedan parked under a flickering light at the far end. Marcus approached cautiously, scanning for movement in the shadows. A solitary figure waited near the sedan, silhouetted against the dim light. As Marcus drew closer, he recognized the man who had introduced himself as Robert Whitman. "You're persistent, Johnson," the man said, his voice echoing slightly in the empty lot. "Almost ruined everything." "What are you talking about? Why are you doing this?" Marcus demanded, stopping several feet away. "Teresa shouldn't have died." The man took a step forward. "My company developed the experimental drug that could have saved her. Your supervisor at Apex buried the test reports to save costs." Marcus felt his legs weaken. "How do you know about Teresa?" "Because I've spent 3 years tracking down everyone affected by that decision." The man smiled without humor. "But you weren't on my radar until you helped the old man. An actor I hired, by the way." Before Marcus could process this information, shadows detached from the darkness around them. Men emerged from behind abandoned cars and concrete pillars, forming a circle around Marcus. Marcus's instincts screamed for him to run, but the circle of men closed any avenue of escape. Despite the hopelessness of his situation, he shifted into a defensive stance, ready to fight if necessary. "My name is Daniel Mercer," the false Robert continued, his polished demeanor now tinged with something darker. "Teresa participated in our clinical study before her treatment was abruptly terminated. I've tracked every patient we lost." His eyes narrowed as he studied Marcus. "But you're different from the other family members. You have something we need." The men tightened their circle. Marcus counted 5 of them, all wearing dark clothing, all watching him with predatory focus. Even if he could somehow break past one, the others would catch him before he made it 10 feet. "I don't have anything you want," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just trying to keep my family together." Daniel sighed, removing a slim laptop from the sedan and placing it on the hood. "The code," he explained, opening the computer. "Before leaving Apex, you worked on the security system protecting the files that prove their negligence. We need that algorithm." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "I haven't had access to that for years." "But you have the ability to recreate it," Daniel countered, gesturing toward the laptop. "Do this, and we'll not only resolve your financial situation, but ensure your children remain with you." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. This man had been watching him, knew about his struggles with Child Protective Services, knew exactly how desperate his situation had become. "You set all this up," Marcus realized aloud. "The flat tire, the fake job offer, even the eviction timing, that was you." Daniel shrugged. "The eviction was inevitable. We simply accelerated the timeline. Made an anonymous call to CPS, too. Nothing that wasn't already coming your way." "Why not just ask for my help? Why the elaborate charade?" Would you have trusted a stranger who approached you directly about hacking your former employer? Daniel raised an eyebrow. Besides, we needed to assess your character. The flat tire test confirmed what we'd hoped. You're a decent man in an indecent situation. Marcus's mind raced through his options. The security algorithm he'd helped develop at Apex was proprietary. Using his knowledge to bypass it would be unequivocally illegal, regardless of the moral justification. And if I refuse? Daniel's expression hardened. The custody hearing is tomorrow. No job, no home. He let the implication hang in the air. You really think you'll keep custody? The laptop screen glowed in the darkness, waiting. Marcus thought of Jamie and Zoe sleeping in the community center, unaware that their future hung in the balance in this abandoned parking lot. I'll need a few hours, Marcus said finally, stepping toward the computer. This isn't something I can do in minutes. As Marcus sat on the hood of the car, the laptop balanced on his knees, one of Daniel's men handed him a bottled water. Another stood directly behind him, watching every keystroke. Marcus began typing, but not the code they wanted. Instead, he crafted a carefully worded message to his former mentor at Apex, using a backdoor communication channel he'd helped create. One that might still exist if they hadn't completely overhauled their security architecture. I'm working on it, he lied, disguising his actual typing with elaborate displays of coding that would look impressive to anyone not intimately familiar with the actual algorithm. But this system had multiple authentication layers. I need to rebuild each one systematically. Daniel seemed satisfied, stepping away to make a phone call while his men maintained their watchful positions. Marcus continued working, alternating between genuine-looking code and hidden messages through the backdoor channel. If his old mentor Diane Chen still worked at Apex, if she still had the same access privileges, if the backdoor channel remained undetected, too many ifs, but his only hope. 3 hours passed in tense silence. Marcus's fingers ached, his eyes burned from staring at the screen. But he continued crafting his false code while embedding urgent messages whenever his watchful guard glanced away. How much longer? Daniel demanded, returning from another call. I'm nearly there, Marcus replied, keying in what appeared to be final sequences. The system had redundancies I'd forgotten about. The sound of distant sirens cut through the night air. Daniel's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. What did you do? He demanded, storming toward Marcus. Before Marcus could respond, helicopter spotlights suddenly illuminated the parking lot, bathing everything in harsh white light. The men surrounding Marcus scattered for cover as voices boomed through megaphones. Federal agents, remain where you are. Daniel looked at Marcus with fury. You have no idea what you've done. The helicopters weren't police but federal agents, and Marcus spotted several Apex executives emerging from black SUVs at the perimeter of the lot. In the chaos that followed, Marcus seized his opportunity. As Daniel's men scrambled and agents repelled from helicopters, Marcus sprinted across the parking lot, ducking behind abandoned cars as bullets ricocheted off concrete around him. Johnson! Daniel's voice carried over the mayhem. You can't run from this. Marcus kept moving, his lungs burning as he zigzagged between vehicles. A stray bullet shattered a car window near his head, showering him with glass. He dove behind a concrete barrier, heart pounding against his ribs. From his position, Marcus could see federal agents engaging with Daniel's men. Daniel himself was backing toward his sedan, a phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders. Using the distraction, Marcus crawled along the row of abandoned cars, making his way toward the perimeter where more vehicles were arriving. If he could reach the federal agents without getting caught in crossfire, he might survive this night. A hand suddenly gripped his shoulder. Marcus whirled, fist raised, only to find himself face to face with a woman in a tailored pantsuit, her Apex ID badge visible on her belt. Marcus Johnson, she whispered urgently. I'm Diane Chen. We need to move now. Recognition flooded through him. His former mentor, now apparently in a senior position based on her attire and authority. "The children," Marcus gasped, "at the community center. Already being secured by our people," she assured him. "We received your message. All of them." Together they crouched ran to an armored SUV waiting at the edge of the parking lot. As Marcus climbed in, he looked back to see Daniel being surrounded by agents, his hands raised, but his expression defiant. "What happens now?" Marcus asked as the vehicle pulled away, adrenaline still coursing through his system. "Now," Diane replied, "we keep you and your children safe while unraveling exactly what Daniel Mercer has been up to." The following weeks passed in a blur of safe houses, depositions, and gradually piecing together the fragments of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond what Marcus could have imagined. 6 weeks after that night in the parking lot, Marcus adjusted his tie in the mirror of his new apartment. The place was modest but clean and bright, 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, walking distance to the children's new school. "Ready for your first official day?" Diane Chen asked, checking her watch as she waited in the living room. Marcus nodded, picking up his new briefcase. Jamie and Zoe, dressed for their important day in court, waited by the door, their expressions a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I still can't believe you gave me the ethics in research department," Marcus smiled, straightening his lapels one last time. "Who better than someone who refused millions to do the right thing?" Diane replied. "Besides, the flexible hours allow you to be with the children." The drive to the courthouse was quiet, each of them lost in thought about the journey that had brought them here. The federal investigation had cleaned house at Apex, removing executives who had buried research to save costs, research that might have saved Teresa and countless others. Daniel Mercer, they discovered, had lost his wife to the same illness as Teresa, fueling his vendetta against Apex. His methods were wrong, but his grievance had been legitimate. In the courthouse, the judge reviewed the final custody documents, nodding approvingly at Marcus's new employment contract and housing arrangement. "Mr. Johnson has demonstrated extraordinary resilience and commitment to his children's welfare," Mrs. Bennett testified, her earlier skepticism replaced with genuine support. "The new living arrangement and employment situation provide the stability these children need." The judge finalized the process, making Marcus the permanent guardian. Mrs. Bennett offered sincere congratulations as they left the courtroom. "One more thing," the judge mentioned as they prepared to leave. "There's an elderly gentleman waiting outside. Says he knows you." In the corridor, Marcus spotted a gray-haired man leaning on a cane. For a moment, his heart seized. Was this another trick? But as they approached, Marcus realized this wasn't the actor who had played Harold in Daniel's scheme. "How?" Marcus began, confusion evident in his voice. "I came to thank you," the elderly man interrupted with a genuine smile. "A month ago, you really did change my tire in the rain. You said it was what you'd want someone to do for your father if he were alive." Harold extended an envelope. "I'm a retired FBI investigator. When I saw the news about what happened, I connected the dots and helped with the investigation." Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was an offer of full scholarships for both children from the Veterans Foundation. "I don't understand," Marcus said, overwhelmed by this unexpected turn. "The real Harold, me, was coincidental," the man explained. "Mercer's team saw you help me and decided you were the perfect candidate for their scheme. They recreated the scenario with their actor, knowing you'd stop again." That evening, as Marcus tucked the children into their beds in their new home, Jamie looked up at him thoughtfully. "Dad, why did those bad people use you to try to do something wrong?" Marcus considered the question carefully. Sometimes people with good intentions choose wrong paths when they're hurt or angry. "How did you know what was right?" Marcus glanced at Teresa's photo on the nightstand. "Your flat tire wasn't an accident," he said softly. "It was the universe reminding me that even in our darkest hours, we should never stop helping others." or doing what's right. Marcus could still recall the moment he heard Diane Chen's voice through the megaphone that night in the abandoned parking lot. The memory flashed vividly as he stood in his new apartment, adjusting the dark blue tie against his crisp white shirt. 6 weeks had transformed his life from desperate survival to something resembling stability. The apartment wasn't luxurious, but with its 2 bedrooms, functional kitchen, and small balcony overlooking a neighborhood park, it felt like a palace compared to the community-centered dormitory. "Dad, is this okay?" Jamie asked, emerging from his room in khaki pants and a button-down shirt that still had the price tag hanging from the sleeve. Marcus smiled, kneeling to remove the tag. "Perfect, buddy. Very handsome." "I look like a lawyer," Jamie declared proudly. "The best-looking lawyer in Seattle," Marcus agreed, smoothing his son's collar. Zoe twirled into the living room in a floral dress and patent leather shoes. "Do I look like a princess, Daddy?" "Absolutely royal," Marcus assured her, checking his watch. The final custody hearing was in 90 minutes. A gentle knock at the door announced Diane Chen's arrival. Since that night at the parking lot, Diane had become more than Marcus's boss at Apex. She'd become their advocate, their protector, and something approaching a friend. "Everyone ready for the big day?" Diane asked, elegant in a charcoal pantsuit. She handed each child a small gift bag. A little something for courage. Jamie pulled out a miniature compass, while Zoe discovered a delicate bracelet with a tiny star charm. "The compass always points north," Diane explained to Jamie, "so you always know which way is forward. And stars," she said to Zoe, "shine brightest in the darkest nights." In Diane's sleek company car, Marcus gazed out the window, his mind replaying the whirlwind of the past weeks. After his rescue from the parking lot, federal agents had whisked him to a secure location, where he was reunited with the children. Days of debriefings followed, endless questions about Daniel Mercer, the fake Robert Whitman, and every detail of their interactions. "You're quiet," Diane observed, glancing at him as they stopped at a traffic light. "Just thinking about how fast everything changed," Marcus replied. "Those first days after the raid, I wasn't sure we'd ever get here." Diane nodded. "When you sent that coded message through our old backdoor channel, I almost dismissed it. No one had used that pathway in years. If I hadn't recognized your programming style." The investigation had revealed the full extent of Daniel's operation. After losing his wife to the same illness that claimed Teresa, Daniel had founded a biotech startup dedicated to continuing the experimental treatment that Apex had abandoned. His vendetta against the company had grown from grief to obsession, leading him to target family members of deceased patients for recruitment or exploitation. "The hearing should be straightforward," Diane said as they approached the courthouse. "Your employment contract is solid, housing is stable, and the children are doing well in their new school. Plus, you have quite the character witness in me." She smiled wryly. Since the raid, Apex had undergone a corporate transformation. With several executives indicted for burying research that could have saved lives, Diane had been appointed interim CEO, tasked with rebuilding the company's ethical foundation. Her first act had been to create a new department, Ethics in Research and Patient Advocacy, with Marcus as its director. "I still don't understand why you gave me that position," Marcus said as they parked. "There must be dozens of people more qualified." "Qualifications aren't just about degrees and experience," Diane replied, turning to face him. "When faced with the choice between personal gain and ethical action, you chose ethics even with everything at stake. That's exactly who should be guiding our research protocols." She checked her watch. "We should head in. Judge Matthews is notoriously punctual." Inside the courthouse, Mrs. Bennett greeted them with professional warmth, a stark contrast to their first meetings. The social worker who once viewed Marcus with suspicion now spoke to him as a partner in ensuring the children's welfare. "The judge has reviewed all the updated documentation," she informed them. "Your housing inspection passed with flying colors, and the children's teachers submitted glowing progress reports. The hearing itself proceeded with unexpected swiftness. Judge Matthews, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, reviewed the file thoroughly before addressing Marcus directly. "Mr. Johnson," she began, removing her reading glasses. "6 weeks ago, your case represented one of the most precarious situations I've seen: unemployment, homelessness, and children at risk. Today, I see one of the most remarkable turnarounds in my career." She turned to Mrs. Bennett, who stepped forward. "Mr. Johnson has demonstrated extraordinary resilience and commitment to his children's welfare," the social worker testified. "The new living arrangements and employment situation provide exactly the stability these children need. In my professional opinion, there is no better place for Jamie and Zoe than with their father." The judge nodded, signing the final documents with a flourish. "Mr. Johnson, I hereby finalize your permanent custody of Jamie and Zoe Johnson. Court adjourned." The simple pronouncement unlocked something in Marcus's chest, a knot of tension he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was there. He gathered the children into his arms, holding them tightly as they squirmed with excitement about getting ice cream to celebrate. As they prepared to leave, the court clerk approached. "Excuse me, Mr. Johnson. There's an elderly gentleman waiting outside. Says he knows you and it's important." Marcus exchanged a puzzled glance with Diane. "Did you arrange something?" She shook her head. "Be careful." In the corridor, Marcus spotted a gray-haired man leaning on a cane. His heart skipped. Another trap. But as they approached, he realized this wasn't the actor who had played Harold in Daniel's scheme. This man was older, his posture military straight despite the cane, his eyes sharp with intelligence. "Mr. Johnson," the man greeted, extending his free hand. "Harold Pearson. I believe we met about a month ago, though you wouldn't remember my name since we never properly introduced ourselves." Marcus stared, recognition dawning. "You're the real flat tire?" Harold nodded. "I came to thank you. 1 month ago, you really did change my tire in the rain. You said it was what you'd want someone to do for your father if he were alive." He extended an envelope toward Marcus. "I'm a retired FBI investigator. When I saw the news reports about what happened to you, I connected the dots and helped with the investigation." Marcus accepted the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was an official letter offering full scholarships for both children from the Veterans Foundation. "I don't understand," Marcus said, overwhelmed by this unexpected turn. "Coincidence and calculation intersected," Harold explained. "The real flat tire, me, was coincidental. Mercer's team observed you helping and decided you were the perfect candidate for their scheme. They recreated the scenario with their actor, knowing you'd stop again based on your demonstrated character." "But how did they know about my programming background?" Marcus asked. "They didn't. Not until after you helped the first time. They ran a background check and discovered you were exactly what they needed. Someone with intimate knowledge of Apex's security systems and a powerful motivation to seek justice." As they stood talking, Jamie tugged at Marcus's sleeve, pointing to an information kiosk displaying news headlines. The largest showed Daniel Mercer being escorted in handcuffs, with the caption, "Biotech CEO indicted in corporate espionage case." Diane stepped forward, studied Harold with professional assessment, then offered her hand. "Mr. Pearson, I'd like to invite you to join us for that ice cream. I think we all have more to discuss." Later that evening, after a celebration that included ice cream sundaes and a tour of the children's new school, Marcus helped Jamie and Zoe prepare for bed in their new home. As he tucked them in, Jamie looked up thoughtfully. "Dad, why did those bad people use you to try to do something wrong?" Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, considering how to explain complex moral questions to a 7-year-old. "Sometimes people with good intentions choose wrong paths when they're hurt or angry. Like when I pushed Eric at school because he said mean things about Mom?" Jamie asked quietly. "Something like that." Marcus nodded. Mr. Mercer lost someone he loved, just like we lost Mom. But instead of finding a healthy way forward, he let his pain turn into something that hurt other people. How did you know what was right? Marcus's eyes drifted to Teresa's photograph on the nightstand, her smile radiant even as illness had begun to claim her. Your flat tire wasn't an accident, he said softly. It was the universe reminding me that even in our darkest hours, we should never stop helping others or doing what's right. After the children were asleep, Marcus sat at his new kitchen table, reviewing the documents Harold had provided about the Veterans Foundation scholarships. His phone buzzed with a text message from Diane. Security protocols updated. All systems secure. As he set the phone down, it buzzed again with an incoming message from an encrypted number he didn't recognize. Not all players have been captured. Whitman is still at large. Marcus sat alone in the dim light of his kitchen, staring at the encrypted message on his phone. The bright screen illuminated his face in the darkness as he read it again. Not all players have been captured. Whitman is still at large. He ran his fingers through his hair, tension returning to his shoulders after the brief respite of their courthouse victory. Who had sent this? Was it another trap or a genuine warning? After everything they'd been through, paranoia felt justified. Marcus glanced down the hallway toward the children's bedrooms, their doors slightly ajar as they slept peacefully, unaware of this new threat. He considered calling Diane immediately, but hesitated. It was past midnight, and what could she do at this hour anyway? Instead, he took a screenshot of the message and sent it to the secure email address she'd provided for emergencies. Then he methodically checked all the locks in the apartment before finally heading to bed, his mind churning with questions about the mysterious Whitman. Morning came too quickly. As Marcus prepared breakfast, Jamie and Zoe chatted excitedly about their new school. The normalcy of the moment, making toast, pouring juice, checking backpacks, felt both precious and precarious. Everyone ready? Marcus asked, gathering lunchboxes and keys. He'd spent the early hours developing a new routine, checking under the car before starting it, scanning the street for unfamiliar vehicles, memorizing the faces of regular passers-by. The drive to school was uneventful, but Marcus remained hypervigilant, checking his mirrors frequently for signs of surveillance. Why do you keep looking behind us, Dad? Jamie asked from the back seat. Just being careful, Marcus replied, forcing a smile. New neighborhood, new driving patterns. After dropping the children off, Marcus watched them enter the building, waiting until they were safely inside before driving to Apex. The company headquarters looked different now, no longer the intimidating glass fortress that had rejected him 6 weeks ago. Today, he swiped his new security badge at the entrance with purpose, nodding to the security guard, who recognized him with a respectful, "Good morning, Mr. Johnson." The elevator carried him to the executive floor, where his new office, modest but with a door that closed, awaited him. As Director of Ethics and Research, Marcus had been granted access to areas of the company most employees never saw, including restricted digital archives containing data from past clinical trials. Diane Chen was waiting in his office, a tablet in her hands and concern etched on her face. "I got your message," she said without preamble. "Any idea who sent it?" Marcus shook his head. "The number's untraceable. I checked this morning." Diane placed her tablet on his desk, displaying a confidential company directory. "Your new role gives you clearance to know things few others do. I've spent the night researching Whitman in our archives." "And?" "There are references to a Project Whitman in some of the older files, but most of the documentation is fragmented. Deliberately, I suspect. It appears to have been a clinical trial from about 5 years ago." "Teresa's trial?" Marcus asked, his throat tightening. Diane nodded solemnly. "Possibly, the timing fits. But I need you to be careful, Marcus. If you start digging too obviously, you might alert whoever sent that warning or whoever they're warning you about." After Diane left, Marcus settled into his new responsibilities, reviewing proposed research protocols while discreetly exploring the company's digital archives whenever he could. He noticed a security guard occasionally passing by his office, ostensibly on regular rounds, but the frequency suggested otherwise. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had identified several references to Project Whitman in secured files, but nothing substantial enough to understand its full scope. The project appeared to have been compartmentalized, with information deliberately spread across different servers and security levels. As he headed to the research floor for a scheduled meeting, Marcus encountered an elderly scientist waiting for the elevator. The man's ID badge identified him as Dr. Amit Patel, Senior Research Fellow. "You're Johnson, aren't you?" Dr. Patel asked as they stepped into the elevator together. "The new ethics director?" "That's right," Marcus confirmed, extending his hand. Dr. Patel shook it firmly, studying Marcus with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I knew your wife." The simple statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You knew Teresa?" "She was patient 37B in the—" Dr. Patel stopped abruptly, his expression shifting from openness to guarded caution. "I'm sorry. That was inappropriate of me." "No, please," Marcus urged as the elevator doors opened. "I'd like to hear more." "Perhaps another time," Dr. Patel said tersely, hurrying away down the corridor. Throughout the meeting that followed, Marcus could barely focus as his mind kept returning to that brief exchange. Dr. Patel had clearly recognized Teresa's name and seemed frightened by his own near slip. When the meeting concluded, Marcus quickly made his way to the parking garage, hoping to catch Dr. Patel before he left for the day. He spotted the scientist unlocking an aging Volvo in a far corner. "Dr. Patel," Marcus called, approaching quickly but cautiously, "I'd appreciate a few minutes of your time." The older man froze, then slowly turned. "Mr. Johnson, I don't think—" "Please, you mentioned my wife, Teresa Johnson, patient 37B. Dr. Patel glanced around nervously before sighing in resignation. "Not here. Follow me." They drove separately to a small coffee shop several blocks from Apex headquarters. Inside, Dr. Patel chose a corner table far from other patrons and waited until they had been served before speaking. "I shouldn't be talking to you," he began, stirring his tea without drinking it, "but I've carried this burden for too long." "What burden? What was Project Whitman?" Dr. Patel winced at the name. "Not what. Who? Whitman isn't a project, it's a person, or rather a code name for someone extremely powerful." "I don't understand." Project Whitman was officially designated as an experimental treatment protocol for advanced lymphatic cancers. Unofficially, it was a testing ground for methodologies that would never pass ethical review. Marcus leaned forward. "Teresa was part of this?" "Your wife was selected because her genetic profile showed extraordinary promise for the treatment. The initial results were remarkable. Her cancer began retreating within weeks." Dr. Patel's eyes filled with regret. Then came the order to terminate the trial. "Why? If it was working?" "The official reason was financial. The treatment was deemed too expensive to pursue. The actual reason—" Dr. Patel lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. "The treatment worked too well for the wrong demographics." "What does that mean?" "It means pharmaceutical companies don't make money from cures, Mr. Johnson. They make money from treatments." Dr. Patel stood abruptly. "There's an isolated server containing all the original Whitman data. It's kept at a facility outside the city. That's all I can tell you." As Dr. Patel hurried toward the door, he turned back briefly. "Be careful who you trust at Apex, even now." That evening, as Marcus drove to pick up the children from their after-school program, he noticed a black sedan parked across from the school entrance. The car's windows were tinted too darkly to see inside, but something about its stillness made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He pulled up directly in front of the school entrance and went inside to collect Jamie and Zoe, keeping them close as they returned to the car. The black sedan remained motionless, but Marcus felt certain its occupants were watching. At home, Marcus helped the children with homework and prepared dinner, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy while his mind raced with questions about Project Whitman and the mysterious warning message. As the children watched a cartoon before bedtime, his phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello?" Marcus answered cautiously. Silence greeted him, then 3 words in a digitally altered voice. "Janitor's closet, tomorrow." The line went dead before Marcus could respond. He stared at the phone, then quickly checked all the doors and windows of the apartment again. The following morning, after dropping the children at school, noting with relief that the black sedan was nowhere in sight, Marcus arrived at Apex earlier than usual. The building was quiet, with only security staff and early arriving researchers present. On the research floor, Marcus casually made his way to the janitor's closet near the emergency stairwell. After ensuring no one was watching, he slipped inside the small, dimly lit space filled with cleaning supplies. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just mops, buckets, and shelves of chemical cleaners. Then, checking behind a stack of paper towels, he found a small USB drive taped to the underside of a shelf. Back in his office with the door locked, Marcus inserted the drive into his computer with cautious anticipation. The drive contained only 2 files: a text document with coordinates and an access code, and a redacted research abstract with Project Whitman stamped across the top. The abstract's conclusion had escaped redaction. Initial results indicate 94% efficacy in targeted genetic profiles, with complete remission in 73% of test subjects after 3 treatment cycles. Termination of the study is recommended due to redacted concerns about market implications and redacted. Marcus quickly copied the files to his secured tablet, then removed the drive and concealed it in his wallet. He spent the rest of the day performing his regular duties while discreetly researching the coordinates from the drive. They pointed to an abandoned research facility in the mountains, about 2 hours outside the city. As the workday ended, Marcus gathered his belongings, his mind already formulating a plan to investigate the facility over the weekend. He would need to arrange childcare, perhaps ask Diane for assistance without revealing too much. In the parking garage, Marcus approached his car, keys in hand. He stopped abruptly when he noticed something on the passenger seat, an envelope that hadn't been there this morning. His heart pounding, he carefully opened the car door and picked it up. Inside was a recent photograph of Jamie and Zoe playing at their school playground, clearly taken with a telephoto lens. On the back, written in precise handwriting, "They will complete Project Whitman. You have 48 hours." Marcus stared at the photograph, his hands trembling so violently he nearly dropped it. His children's smiling faces, captured without their knowledge, turned his fear into something primal and overwhelming. He immediately pulled out his phone and called the school, pulse racing until the secretary confirmed that both Jamie and Zoe were safe and attending their afternoon classes. "Is everything all right, Mr. Johnson?" she asked, clearly noting the panic in his voice. "Yes, just... Can you check on them again in an hour? I'm running late today." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his car, mind racing through options. The threat was explicit: 48 hours to do... what exactly? The message mentioned completing Project Whitman, but offered no specifics on what that entailed or who was behind it. One thing was painfully clear: someone was using his children as leverage. His first instinct was to call Diane, to bring the full resources of Apex and the federal investigation to bear. His finger hovered over her number, but something held him back. Dr. Patel's warning echoed in his mind. Be careful who you trust at Apex, even now. Diane had given him this job, had helped secure his custody of the children, had seemingly been his champion throughout the ordeal. But she'd also been at Apex when Teresa was part of the trial, when Project Whitman was operational. Marcus had no proof she wasn't involved, only his instinct and their shared history. He started the car and drove directly to the school, needing to see Jamie and Zoe with his own eyes. As he watched them through the classroom window, laughing during their art class, completely unaware of the danger surrounding them, Marcus made his decision. He couldn't risk their safety on blind trust. 20 minutes later, he was on the phone with Harold Pearson, the retired FBI investigator who had helped before. "I need somewhere safe for the children," Marcus explained after describing the threat. "Somewhere no one would associate with me." Harold didn't hesitate. "My cabin. It's about 2 hours outside the city, well off the main roads. Security system, no neighbors for miles. Can you get there tonight? I'll leave within the hour. Bring them after dark." Marcus picked up the children early, citing a special family dinner as the reason. Their excited chatter about school projects and new friends filled the car as Marcus constantly checked the rearview mirror for any signs of surveillance. "Are we going to a restaurant?" Zoe asked, clutching her ever-present teddy bear. "Something even better," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice light. "We're going on a mini-adventure to visit a new friend." "What friend?" Jamie, always perceptive, sounded skeptical. "His name is Mr. Harold. He's like a grandpa, and he has a cabin in the woods with deer and rabbits that come right up to the porch." When they arrived at Harold's cabin, the old man was waiting on the porch, leaning on his cane, but standing straight-backed and alert. The cabin looked rustic from the outside, but proved to be comfortably equipped inside, with modern amenities alongside traditional furnishings. "You must be Jamie and Zoe," Harold greeted them warmly. "I've heard you're both excellent at board games, and I happen to have quite a collection." While Harold showed the children his impressive array of games, Marcus took him aside briefly. "I can't thank you enough for this." "No thanks needed," Harold replied quietly. "I've got a state-of-the-art security system, and this old cane conceals something a bit more persuasive." He patted the walking stick meaningfully. "They'll be safe with Grandpa Harold." Marcus knelt before his children, choosing his words carefully. "Listen, I need you both to stay with Mr. Harold for a few days while I take care of some important work." "Is it dangerous?" Jamie asked, his eyes suddenly serious. Marcus hesitated, then decided on honesty. "It might be, but staying here with Mr. Harold will keep you safe, and that helps me do what I need to do." "Like how Mom had to stay in the hospital sometimes?" Zoe asked quietly. Marcus swallowed hard. "Something like that. I'll call every night before bedtime, and I'll be back as soon as I can." The drive back to the city felt longer without the children's chatter. Marcus's phone rang as he approached the city limits. Diane Chen. "Where have you been?" she asked without preamble. "You disappeared after work, and security noted you left in a hurry." "Had to pick up the kids early," Marcus replied, purposely vague. "School thing." "Marcus, you seemed distracted all day. Is everything all right?" He considered his response carefully. "Just adjusting to the new routine. Sorry if I worried you. We should talk tomorrow. There are some developments in the Mercer case you should know about." After hanging up, Marcus drove directly to his apartment, packed a small bag with essentials, and loaded his laptop with the data from the USB drive. He left most lights on to suggest occupancy, then departed through the rear entrance, taking a circuitous route to ensure he wasn't followed. At an internet cafe across town, Marcus used a computer to access Apex's servers remotely, employing the credentials and backdoor access he'd quietly established over the past weeks. His focus now was on accessing anything related to Project Whitman and understanding what completing it might entail. The encrypted files revealed a disturbing picture. Project Whitman had been a comprehensive study examining how experimental drugs affected different ethnic groups. The data showed that the treatment had been extraordinarily effective for certain genetic profiles, including Teresa's, but had been abruptly terminated despite promising results. Marcus found a document dated 3 months before Teresa's death, a directive ordering the termination of treatment for a control group that included patient 37B, Teresa. The document outlined the scientific necessity of having untreated subjects to validate the efficacy of the treatment in others. "They used her as a control," Marcus whispered, rage building in his chest. "They deliberately withheld treatment that was working." He continued searching, determined to find who had authorized this unconscionable protocol. The answer came in a heavily redacted proposal document, where one signature remained partially visible. D. Ch, followed by an indecipherable scrawl, D. Chen, Diane Chen. Marcus sat back, stunned. The woman who had seemingly saved him, given him a new start, had potentially been involved in the decision that killed Teresa. Could it be a different person, with the same initials? He needed more proof before confronting her. Using his phone's camera, Marcus discreetly captured images of the most damning documents, careful to leave no trace of his access in the system logs. As he worked, his phone vibrated with a text from Harold. "Unknown vehicle circled property twice. Taking precautions. Children secure." Marcus immediately gathered his things and left the cafe. The coordinates from the USB drive pointed to a location about 90 minutes north, an abandoned research facility owned by an Apex subsidiary that had been shuttered 5 years ago. If answers existed anywhere, they would be there. The drive through darkening mountain roads was tense, with Marcus constantly checking for headlights, following too closely, or for too long. The facility itself was hidden at the end of an overgrown access road, identifiable only by a faded sign reading Northwest Biopharmaceutical Research Division. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, but years of neglect had created several entry points where the metal had collapsed. Marcus parked his car in a thicket of trees and proceeded on foot, flashlight in hand but unlit, relying on the nearly full moon to navigate. The main building stood like a concrete monolith, windows dark and doors secured with heavy padlocks. Marcus circled the perimeter until he found a service entrance with a padlock that had rusted significantly. Using a tire iron from his car, he managed to break it free after several attempts. Inside, the facility was eerily preserved, dust-covered equipment draped with plastic tarps, paperwork still stacked in forgotten inboxes, coffee mugs abandoned mid-sip years ago. Marcus moved carefully through the silent hallways, seeking what he assumed would be a secure server room or record storage. In what appeared to be the main research area, Marcus found row after row of filing cabinets. Many were empty, their contents clearly removed during the facility's closure, but others remained partially filled with hard copy records deemed unimportant enough to leave behind. One cabinet was different, newer, with a modern digital lock rather than a mechanical one. Marcus examined it carefully, then tried the access code from the USB drive. The lock's light blinked green, and the drawer slid open to reveal neatly organized files labeled Whitman Phase 3. As Marcus began examining the documents by the beam of his flashlight, the true scope of Project Whitman became clear. It wasn't just a clinical trial. It was a methodical study of treatment efficacy across racial lines, with certain groups deliberately receiving placebos or reduced dosages to establish baseline comparisons. The ethics violations were staggering in their scope and deliberateness. Most disturbing was a memo outlining the strategic market considerations that had ultimately led to the project's termination. The treatment had proven most effective in demographics deemed financially non-viable, patients without premium insurance coverage, primarily from minority communities. The memo coldly concluded that pursuing a drug that primarily benefited low-revenue demographic segments was contrary to shareholder interests. At the bottom of the memo was a full signature, not Diane Chen's, but William Whitman, chairman of Whitman Pharmaceuticals, a major Apex investor. As Marcus photographed the documents, sudden flashlight beams swept across the windows from outside. A woman's voice, amplified through a megaphone, cut through the silence. "Marcus Johnson, you are trespassing on private property. Exit the building with your hands up." Marcus froze, the document still clutched in his hand as the flashlight beams swept across the dusty windows. His mind raced through his options. There had to be another exit, perhaps through the back of the facility. But running would only confirm his guilt, and he wasn't even certain who had found him. Federal agents? Apex Security? Or someone more sinister? For a brief moment he considered hiding, but the beam of light cutting through the darkness made that impossible. With resignation, Marcus carefully placed the files back in the drawer, closed it, and walked slowly toward the front entrance, hands raised slightly above his shoulders. The bright lights momentarily blinded him as he stepped outside. Through squinted eyes, he made out 3 figures, Diane Chen and 2 men in Apex Security uniforms. "Diane," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I can explain." Instead of responding, Diane turned to the security officers. "Wait by the vehicles. I need to speak with Mr. Johnson privately." The men hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. "Now, please," Diane added, with unmistakable authority. Once they were alone, Diane approached Marcus, her expression unreadable in the shadows between the harsh beams of light. "Lower your hands, Marcus. I'm not here to arrest you." "Then why are you here? How did you find me?" Diane sighed, switching off her flashlight. "The same way you found this place. I've been tracking the encrypted messages sent to your phone. I've been investigating Project Whitman for months." Marcus stared at her, trying to reconcile this claim with the signature he'd just seen. "Your name was on one of the documents. D.Ch. You were involved." "I was a junior scientific supervisor when the project began," Diane admitted. "I was removed from the team when I questioned their methodologies. That partial signature you saw? It was on my formal objection to the study design." Marcus remained skeptical. "Prove it." Without a word, Diane pulled out her phone, scrolled through several files, and handed it to him. On the screen was a scanned document, Diane's letter of ethical concern regarding Project Whitman, dated 7 years earlier, and the subsequent memo removing her from the research team for incompatible research priorities. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Marcus asked, returning her phone. "Because I didn't know how deep your involvement with Mercer went until the night of the raid. After that, I needed to be sure I could trust you." She gestured toward the building. "Let's continue this conversation inside. It's too exposed out here." Back inside the facility, Diane produced a small flashlight and led Marcus deeper into the building, past the file room to what appeared to be a former executive office. She secured the door behind them. "I've been building a case against Project Whitman since I became interim CEO," she explained, removing a thumb drive from her jacket pocket. "This contains everything I've gathered: internal memos, unauthorized protocols, falsified research reports. I believe William Whitman used Apex as a front for conducting his own private research." "William Whitman," Marcus repeated. "I just found his signature on a memo explaining why the treatment was discontinued. It was working, Diane. It could have saved Teresa." Diane nodded grimly. "And hundreds of others. But Whitman determined the drug would primarily benefit unprofitable demographics, so he buried it. When I started asking questions back then, I was sidelined, but I never stopped looking." Marcus processed this information, studying Diane's face for any sign of deception. "Why bring security with you tonight?" "Protection," she replied simply. "I wasn't sure what we'd find here or who might be watching the facility. Whitman has powerful allies." Together, they returned to the file cabinet. Marcus used the access code again, and they systematically photographed every document inside. As they worked, Marcus explained about the threatening message in the photograph of his children. "Where are they now?" Diane asked, concern evident in her voice. Somewhere safe, Marcus replied, still not ready to divulge Harold's involvement. As they explored deeper into the facility, they discovered a hidden room behind what appeared to be an ordinary supply closet. Inside was a small, dust-covered safe embedded in the wall. This wasn't in any of the building plans, Diane murmured, examining the combination lock. Marcus studied the safe, then remembered the access code from the USB drive. On a hunch, he tried entering it into the combination lock. To his surprise, the handle turned, and the heavy door swung open. Inside were several leather-bound notebooks, handwritten research journals documenting the real Project Whitman in meticulous detail. The entries, spanning several years, were signed by Dr. William Whitman himself. "These are his personal research notes," Diane whispered, carefully turning the brittle pages. He was experimenting with genetic targeting, developing treatments that would work differently based on specific genetic markers. "Why would that be controversial enough to hide?" Marcus asked. Diane's expression darkened as she continued reading. "Because he wasn't just studying genetic differences, he was exploiting them, creating treatments that would be highly effective for certain genetic profiles, while deliberately less effective for others." She looked up at Marcus, horror in her eyes. He was using Apex resources to develop race-specific medications. As they photographed the journals, Marcus's phone rang. Harold's number flashed on the screen. "Harold, is everything okay?" Marcus answered immediately, tension evident in his voice. "Two men in a black SUV just forced their way onto the property," Harold replied, his voice remarkably calm despite the situation. "I've moved the children to the safe room we discussed, but they've breached the perimeter." "Are Jamie and Zoe safe?" Marcus demanded, panic rising in his throat. "For now, but—" The line suddenly went dead. "Harold, Harold!" Marcus shouted into the phone, but there was no response. "What happened?" Diane asked, alarmed by Marcus's reaction. "My children are in danger," Marcus explained frantically, already moving toward the exit. "Two men in an SUV just breached the property where they're staying." They rushed back to their vehicles, Marcus leading the way with reckless speed. Once inside his car, he explained the situation to Diane through his open window. "I'll call in every resource we have," she promised, pulling out her phone. "The local sheriff, state police, everyone. There's no time," Marcus insisted. "Harold's place is over an hour from here, and the nearest police station is probably just as far." Diane's face hardened with determination. "Then we go ourselves. Follow me. My SUV has tracking capabilities. We can access the traffic cameras along the route and try to identify the vehicle." Racing through the mountain roads, Marcus followed Diane's SUV while she coordinated with her security team through her vehicle's communication system. Through her connections, they accessed the traffic camera network, identifying a black SUV that had passed through the area 20 minutes earlier. "License plate registered to a shell company," Diane informed Marcus through a hands-free call. "Same corporate structure that Whitman uses for his private holdings." "William Whitman is behind this?" Marcus asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It fits his pattern," Diane confirmed. "He uses proxies for anything questionable." "The shell company that owns that SUV is registered to the same address as 6 other companies connected to his private research initiatives." As they approached the rural area where Harold's cabin was located, Diane's tracking system indicated the SUV had turned off the main road approximately 5 miles ahead. "That's the access road to Harold's property," Marcus confirmed, his heart pounding painfully in his chest. They killed their headlights as they approached, parking a quarter-mile from the cabin and proceeding on foot through the dense forest. When they reached the edge of the clearing, they could see the black SUV parked near Harold's porch. The front door of the cabin stood open, lights spilling out into the night. "I'll approach from the back," Diane whispered, drawing a small pistol from an ankle holster. "Wait for my signal." "You're armed?" Marcus asked, surprised. CEO of a pharmaceutical company under federal investigation? I've had threats. She checked the weapon with practiced ease. Give me 3 minutes to get in position. As Diane disappeared into the darkness, Marcus felt utterly helpless. Somewhere in that cabin were his children, the only family he had left in the world, and he had put them in danger by pursuing Whitman's secrets. Before the 3 minutes had elapsed, Marcus's phone vibrated with an incoming video call. He answered immediately, hiding deeper in the shadows of the trees. On the screen, Jamie and Zoe appeared, sitting on an elegant sofa in what was clearly not Harold's rustic cabin. They looked frightened, but unharmed, their eyes wide with confusion. A gentle, elderly voice spoke from somewhere off camera. "Mr. Johnson, it's time we finally meet. Teresa's legacy depends on it." The mountain road stretched before them like a dark ribbon, illuminated only by Diane's headlights as Marcus followed close behind in his own vehicle. His phone, propped on the dashboard, still displayed the frozen image from the video call, Jamie and Zoe's frightened faces looking back at him from an unfamiliar setting. The elderly voice that had spoken still echoed in his mind. Teresa's legacy depends on it. "Turn right at the next fork," Diane instructed through the hands-free connection. "Satellite imagery shows a private road leading to a large estate, property records listed as belonging to Whitman Enterprises." Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, his mind racing between fury and fear. How did they find the kids? Harold's cabin was completely off the grid. "Professional trackers, most likely," Diane replied grimly. "The same people Whitman has used to eliminate problems for years." As they approached the turnoff, Marcus spotted the elaborate wrought iron gate guarding the entrance to the estate. 2 armed guards stood at attention beside a security booth. "We can't just drive up," Marcus said, pulling over to the side of the road before they could be spotted. "We won't," Diane agreed, stopping alongside him. She reached into her glove compartment and withdrew a small case containing what appeared to be ID badges. "These are executive override credentials. As acting CEO, I can authorize entry to any Whitman-affiliated property for corporate oversight." "And if they don't accept that explanation?" Diane's expression hardened. "Then we move to Plan B." "Which is?" She didn't answer, instead pulling away and driving directly toward the gate. Marcus followed, heart pounding as they approached the guards, who immediately raised their hands to signal them to stop. Diane lowered her window, presenting her credentials with calm authority. "Diane Chen, acting CEO of Apex Pharmaceuticals. I have an urgent meeting with Dr. Whitman." The guard examined her ID, then made a brief call on his radio. After a tense moment, he nodded, and the massive gate began to swing open. "They're expecting us," Marcus whispered as they drove through. "That can't be good." The driveway wound through manicured grounds for nearly half a mile before revealing a sprawling mansion perched on the mountainside. Its modernist architecture of glass, stone, and steel seemed to grow organically from the rocky terrain, illuminated by tasteful landscape lighting. As they parked near the entrance, Marcus spotted the black SUV that had been at Harold's cabin. "Any sign of Harold?" he asked Diane quietly as they exited their vehicles. "None. But if Whitman wanted him harmed, they wouldn't bring him here." The massive front door opened before they could reach it. Daniel Mercer stood in the entryway, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that contrasted sharply with his prison attire from the news reports. "Mr. Johnson," he greeted with unsettling politeness, "and Ms. Chen, Dr. Whitman anticipated you might trace his location. Please, follow me." Marcus tensed, ready for a trap, but Diane touched his arm lightly. "We need to see this through," she murmured. "For the children." The interior of the mansion was a testament to wealth and scientific achievement. Display cases housed numerous awards and patents, while the walls featured photographs of William Whitman with various world leaders and celebrities. They followed Daniel through a series of hallways into a large study with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley below. Seated in a high-tech wheelchair near the windows was an elderly man with piercing blue eyes and a shock of white hair. Despite his physically frail appearance, there was nothing diminished about his presence. Intelligence and authority radiated from him like heat from a flame. "Mr. Johnson," the man said, his voice matching the one from the phone call. "I'm Dr. William Whitman. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Marcus scanned the room desperately. "Where are my children?" Whitman gestured to a side door, which opened to reveal a matronly woman escorting Jamie and Zoe into the room. The children ran to Marcus immediately, wrapping their arms around his legs. "Daddy!" Zoe cried. "The men took us from Mr. Harold's house." Marcus knelt, checking them quickly for any signs of harm before embracing them tightly. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Jamie shook his head. "They said you were in trouble and we needed to come help you." "And Mr. Harold?" Marcus asked gently. "He tried to stop them," Jamie whispered, "but they were too strong." Marcus stood, positioning himself between his children and Whitman. "If you've hurt Harold—" "Your FBI friend is unharmed," Whitman interrupted. "Merely sedated. He'll wake with a headache, but no lasting damage. I don't harm the innocent, Mr. Johnson." "Just exploit them for research," Diane interjected coldly. Whitman turned his wheelchair to face her. "Ah, Ms. Chen, the perpetual thorn in my side. Still carrying that misplaced moral superiority, I see." He wheeled himself to a large desk and pressed a button on its surface. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a large screen displaying medical images. Teresa's medical images. "I knew your wife quite intimately, Mr. Johnson," Whitman continued. "Not personally, of course, but on a cellular level. Her genetic profile was extraordinary." Marcus felt sick seeing Teresa's medical records displayed so callously. "You had no right." "I had every right," Whitman countered. "She volunteered for the trial, signed all the necessary waivers. What she didn't know, what none of the patients knew, was that they were part of something far more significant than a simple cancer treatment trial." Daniel moved to stand beside Whitman's wheelchair, his role as right-hand man now clear. "Show them the results," he prompted. Whitman pressed another button and the screen changed to display comparative charts of patient outcomes. "Teresa wasn't randomly selected," he explained. "Her genetic markers made her the perfect candidate for our targeted therapy. The treatment was specifically designed to work with her genetic profile." "Then why was it stopped?" Marcus demanded. "The files we found said it was working." "Because pharmaceutical companies don't develop cures for specific genetic subtypes when there's more profit in treatments for the masses," Diane said bitterly. "Especially when those genetic subtypes don't represent significant market share." Whitman's eyes narrowed. "Simplistic, Ms. Chen, but not entirely inaccurate. The economics of drug development require certain compromises." "Compromises?" Marcus echoed, incredulous. "You let people die." "I made a calculated decision," Whitman corrected. "The treatment worked exceptionally well for approximately 8% of the population, primarily those with specific genetic markers most common in certain ethnic minorities. The research and development costs could never be recouped from such a limited market." As Whitman spoke, Marcus noticed Diane slowly positioning herself near the door, her hand discreetly moving toward her concealed weapon. "You're talking about my wife," Marcus said, keeping Whitman's attention focused on him. "Teresa wasn't a statistic or a market segment. She was a person who deserved to live. Many deserve to live, Mr. Johnson, but resources are finite. Difficult choices must be made." "And you appointed yourself to make those choices?" Diane challenged. Whitman smiled thinly. "Someone must, but we're getting distracted from the purpose of this meeting." He turned back to Marcus. "I have a proposition for you." With a gesture to Daniel, Whitman had him place a thick document on the desk between them. "A comprehensive confidentiality agreement. Sign it, and your financial future, and that of your children, will be secured for life. Marcus stared at the document. In exchange for what? Your silence, Whitman said simply. And the return of all evidence you've collected. The journals, the files, everything. You can walk away from this with a $10 million settlement and the knowledge that your children will never want for anything. And if I refuse? Whitman's expression darkened. Then things become considerably more complicated. The evidence you've gathered would mysteriously disappear, along with any digital traces. Your recent erratic behavior, breaking into private property, removing your children from school without notice, associating with known corporate saboteurs, would raise serious questions about your fitness as a parent. The threat wasn't subtle. Marcus felt Jamie's hand tighten in his. You don't have to decide immediately, Daniel interjected, his tone reasonable. Take some time to consider. I've already considered my options thoroughly, Diane interrupted, her voice razor-sharp. I've sent copies of everything we found to journalists and federal prosecutors. It's too late for containment, Whitman. The elderly man appeared unmoved by her claim. A bluff, Ms. Chen. A poorly executed one at that. He pressed another button on his wheelchair. My security systems would have detected any unauthorized transmissions from this property, and we've been jamming all signals since you arrived. Whitman gestured to the document again. Your choice, Mr. Johnson. Security for your family, or unnecessary risk for a principled stand that will ultimately change nothing. Marcus looked down at his children, then at the contract before him. The amount was staggering, enough to provide everything he'd ever wanted for Jamie and Zoe. Education, opportunities, security, everything Teresa would have wanted for them. Daniel stepped forward. We're not so different, you and I, Marcus. We both lost someone we loved to corporate greed. The only difference is how we chose to respond. Marcus felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He thought of Teresa, of her unwavering integrity even in her final days. He looked at the photograph of her on his wristwatch, her smile radiant despite the illness that was consuming her. Whitman followed his gaze. Sentiment is a luxury, Mr. Johnson. Your wife is gone. Your children are here now, depending on you to make the rational choice. With the children clinging to his legs, Marcus looked at the contract on the table, then at Whitman's expectant face, and finally at the small photo of Teresa in his watch. Before speaking the words that would determine everyone's fate, he said quietly, You didn't really know Teresa. You didn't really know Teresa. Marcus's quiet words hung in the air between them. He straightened his shoulders, looking directly into Whitman's cold eyes. My wife believed that truth matters more than comfort, and justice matters more than money. Whitman's expression hardened. Noble sentiments from a woman who died unnecessarily. I'm offering you 10 million reasons to be practical instead. I don't want your money, Marcus said, his voice finding new strength. What I want is for the world to know what you did, what you're still doing. And how exactly will you prove anything? Whitman asked, his confidence unwavering. As I've explained, any evidence you think you've gathered will disappear before it reaches authorities. Marcus smiled slightly as he reached for his watch. Except for what's already been transmitted. He tapped the face of his timepiece. This isn't just a photo of Teresa. It's a recording device. Every word you've said since we entered this room has been captured and streamed to a secure server. Whitman's composure faltered for the first time. Impossible. We've been jamming all signals. The FBI has technology that can bypass standard jammers, Marcus explained. Harold's contribution. You should have been more thorough in your background check. He wasn't just any retired agent. He specialized in counter-surveillance. Diane seized the moment of confusion to move closer to the children. And I activated a silent emergency protocol when we entered the property. Federal agents are already on their way. Daniel lunged for Marcus, but froze at the sound of approaching helicopters. You fool, Whitman hissed, pressing a button on his wheelchair armrest. You have no idea what you've done. This ends nothing. The screens around the room began flashing deletion warnings as remote servers initiated purge protocols. "Your servers won't save you this time," Diane said. "I've spent months creating backup systems specifically designed to preserve evidence against you." Outside, searchlights swept across the mansion grounds as federal helicopters circled overhead. Security alarms blared throughout the building. "We need to move," Marcus told Diane, gathering Jamie and Zoe close. "His security team will try to secure the building." Just as Marcus spoke, the room's doors burst open. 2 armed guards rushed in, weapons drawn. "Sir, federal agents have breached the perimeter," one reported to Whitman. "We need to evacuate you immediately." Whitman nodded grimly. "Secure my research first. Protocol Omega." He turned to Daniel. "Get the backup drives from the safe. Meet me at the extraction point." As the guards moved to assist Whitman, Daniel reached inside his jacket and withdrew a small handgun. "Nobody moves," he ordered, his voice ice cold. "The children stay with me. Insurance for our departure." Marcus instinctively stepped in front of Jamie and Zoe. "They're not going anywhere with you." "This isn't negotiable," Daniel replied, aiming the weapon at Marcus. "Step aside, or I'll ensure your children grow up without any parents." The tension in the room crackled like electricity. Marcus could hear the helicopters growing louder, the sound of boots on gravel outside, but help would arrive too late if Daniel pulled the trigger. "You said we were alike," Marcus said calmly, not moving from his protective stance. "That we both lost someone to corporate greed. If that's true, you wouldn't traumatize innocent children the way Teresa's death traumatized us." Something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or the ghost of his own grief. Before he could respond, Diane moved with unexpected speed, knocking his arm upward as the gun discharged, the bullet embedding in the ceiling. In the chaos that followed, guards shouted orders, furniture toppled, and Marcus shielded the children with his body as they scrambled toward the door. A second shot rang out, this one deliberate, aimed directly at them. Time seemed to slow as Marcus saw Jamie break free from his grasp, turning back with childish bravery to protect his father. Without thinking, Marcus lunged forward, tackling his son to the ground just as a federal agent burst through the doorway and fired a single shot that dropped Daniel to his knees. "Daddy!" Zoe screamed, rushing to where Marcus lay covering Jamie. "It's okay, baby," Marcus assured her, checking Jamie for injuries. "We're okay." Around them, the room filled with tactical officers securing Whitman and the remaining guards. Through the window, Marcus could see more agents apprehending staff attempting to flee across the grounds. "We need a medic here," Diane called, kneeling beside Marcus. "Are you hit?" Marcus shook his head, still covering the children protectively. "Just winded. Keep them safe." As the federal team established control of the mansion, paramedics attended to Daniel's wounded shoulder. Whitman, still in his wheelchair, watched with cold detachment as agents handcuffed him. "You've accomplished nothing," he told Marcus as they led him away. "My work will save millions regardless of what happens to me. History will vindicate my methods." "Your work might save millions," Marcus acknowledged, standing with his children safely at his side. "But you'll answer for those you sacrificed along the way." As Whitman was escorted out, an agent approached with a small metallic object in an evidence bag. "Found this in the safe," she explained. "It appears to be a data core containing complete Project Whitman records." That's what he was trying to destroy, Diane realized. The one piece of evidence that couldn't be remotely deleted. Outside the mansion, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Marcus held Jamie and Zoe close as they watched federal agents leading Whitman, Daniel, and several others to waiting vehicles. "Is it over now, Dad?" Jamie asked quietly. Marcus exchanged glances with Diane. "The dangerous part is over," he promised, "but we still have work to do." 6 months later, Marcus stood at the window of his new office at Apex, watching rain patterns trace across the glass. The view had changed significantly, not just the physical landscape. but his perspective on everything. The legal proceedings against Whitman and his co-conspirators had dominated headlines for months. The evidence recovered from the mansion had revealed decades of unethical research practices, manipulated clinical trials, and deliberate suppression of life-saving treatments deemed financially non-viable. Diane knocked gently before entering, carrying a tablet with the day's agenda. "The first Teresa project grants go out today," she reminded him. "The board approved all 5 applications." Marcus nodded, satisfaction warming him. 5 small research labs developing treatments for non-viable demographics. Teresa would have loved that. The Teresa project had been Marcus's condition for remaining at Apex, a dedicated fund supporting ethical research specifically targeting treatments for underserved populations. Funded by penalties assessed against Whitman's estate and corporate holdings, it represented a tangible form of justice that money alone could never provide. "Jamie's class is visiting at 11, Diane reminded him. "Career day presentation." "I haven't forgotten," Marcus smiled. "Zoe's disappointed she can't come too." "Next year," Diane promised, "when she's in 1st grade." After she left, Marcus gathered his materials for the presentation. Explaining to elementary school children what an ethics director did wasn't simple, but Jamie had been so proud to announce that his dad was visiting that Marcus had spent days preparing kid-friendly examples. The courthouse ceremony later that afternoon was brief, but meaningful. Judge Matthews, who had granted Marcus permanent custody months earlier, now presided over the final dissolution of all claims against the Johnson family. The last legal echoes of their ordeal were finally silenced. "The court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances this family has endured," Judge Matthews concluded, "and commends Mr. Johnson's courage in bringing these violations to light." That evening, Marcus drove Jamie and Zoe to the hillside cemetery where Teresa was buried. The spring rain had passed, leaving the air fresh and the grass vivid green around the simple headstone. "Hi, Mommy," Zoe said, placing a small bouquet of wildflowers at the base of the stone. "Daddy helped make the bad men stop hurting people. And now he helps make sure medicines work for everybody," Jamie added proudly. "Even people without lots of money." Marcus watched his children talk to their mother's grave, their innocent summaries cutting to the heart of what had been accomplished. The Whitman investigation had exposed systemic problems throughout the pharmaceutical industry, triggering reforms that would save countless lives. "I wish you could see them," Marcus said softly when the children moved away to chase a butterfly. "They're so much like you. Your courage, your kindness." A gentle breeze stirred the flowers on the grave, and for a moment, Marcus felt Teresa's presence as clearly as if she stood beside him. As they walked back to the car, Jamie looked up thoughtfully. "Dad, do you think Mom knows what we did? About helping all those people?" Marcus considered the question, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "I think she always knew what kind of people we'd be when tested," he answered. "She believed that small acts of kindness can change the world." "Like stopping to help someone on a rainy day?" Zoe asked. Marcus smiled, remembering the flat tire that had set everything in motion. "Exactly like that." He helped the children into the car, his mind drifting back to that pivotal moment, soaked to the skin, changing a stranger's tire, unaware that the simple act would eventually expose a conspiracy, bring down a pharmaceutical empire, and ultimately save countless lives. "Some people think big changes come from big actions," Marcus told the children as they drove home through the gathering twilight. "But your mom always knew what I'm just learning. Even the smallest act of kindness can change the entire world."